Welcome back to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at another part of the Fifth Frontier War, and this is going to be the Anig Gavar, a terrorist group within the Third Imperium that may or may not be working for the Zodani. Author Martin Doherty breathes some life into an otherwise kind of stale group, and I'm excited to take a look at it today. So it starts on page 93 of my little tablet here, and as soon as my tablet catches up, there we go. They come in as a minor power, and I'm going to find, there we are, 99, sorry. 97 is where they start on my tablet, and page 96 per this. I'm going to blow this up a little bit so we can see it. The Anig Gavar, I say Anig Gavar. I don't know how it's supposed to be pronounced, how people pronounce it. I've always called it that. I've only ever tried to use them in one game. I had a secret sleeper agent in with the group, but the way the game ran, the players never went in that direction, so I never really revealed the NPC as the member he was. So I've never really used them, but I've always liked them. Today, the Anig Gavar movement is widely known as a terrorist organization. One man's terrorist, of course, is another man's patriot. The term terrorist is often misused to malign any insurgent or dissident group the authorities disapprove of, but in this case the label is apt. The Anig Gavar as a whole is willing to use small and large-scale atrocities to create political influence. Their basic deal is they feel the imperial system of all the money and power wrapped up in titles and the upper echelon of society is not fair to the average person in the street. They want to see a more democratic representation rather than representation through nobles and high birth and things like that. The beginnings, the movement was dedicated to opposing social injustice by peaceful means. It was gradually hijacked by more radical groups. Anig Gavar was formed from various like-minded individuals and movements. Concentration of wealth and power in a small class of nobles and megacorporations as seen as a major injustice by most members. Initial activities were peaceful apart from actions of a few hotheads. Protests, petitions, boycotts of some companies and their products, and constant condemnation of social injustice were the original tools, and in some cases the Anig Gavar were surprisingly effective. Few now remember the work of the Anig Gavar in attacking injustice. The idea of movement preaching peace and tolerance and actually meaning it seems laughable now. However, it did happen. The very public work of volunteers shamed governments into helping the worst off in their society. People came to adulthood who might have died as children but for the free clinics run by Anig Gavar personnel and went on to successful careers. There are those who look for a sinister agenda in those early days, but there's none to be found. They were started as a force of good. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly what happened, but over time, they got warped a little bit. And instead of just fighting against social injustices, they became a true terrorist group. Terrorist group is defined in here as a group that attacks civilian targets to reach their social ends, not just a resistance movement which would attack military or government installations. And no atrocity apparently is too big for the Anig Gavar. They've never stopped proclaiming its goal as being the peaceful advocacy of greater democracy and social equity, but most of the members who are true to this ideal have left the group long since. They are a rather nasty insurgency movement that's dedicated to just bringing about change because they feel the Third Imperium needs to be changed. You got a lot of people too that are grinding their own axes in here. Most Anig Gavar chapters believe that the ends justify the means and are willing to engage in terrorism, but some relish it more than others. Majority of actions are still clean, taking the form of insurgency attacks against military targets rather than terrorist attack on civilians. Other means are also routinely used: industrial disruption from strikes or slowdowns, bribery, coercion, and extortion. This is a factor that makes Anig Gavar more dangerous than most insurgent organizations. It is adept at many forms of attack against the fabric of the Imperium. And it has been suggested that the Anig Gavar is a front for the Zodani activities in the Imperium. This is not true as such, but some chapters of the Anig Gavar are now run by Zodani infiltrators. Others are heavily influenced but do not know it, having become dependent on reliable suppliers of arms and information that they don't realize is coming from Zodani agents. While it's not knowingly serving the consulate, the Anig Gavar movement is certainly doing its bidding at least some of the time. And that was the departure I liked. The Anig Gavar were always depicted as this sleeper cell group that popped up as the war started and were doing things to disrupt things internally. I love the idea that they were an organic thing of the Third Imperium that got subverted and corrupted by the Zodani. I just think that's way more interesting. And having it kind of change over here was really neat. The Anig Gavar, they work in cells, which means you have 4 or 5 people you know about and very limited information. So if you get captured, nothing will give up the rest of the members. The aim of civilian operations is to gain strength to identify targets while stirring up dissent and internal division. Once there's sufficient resources, this will escalate to minor acts of terrorism, or preferably inciting those not involved with the Anig Gavar to attack one another. And the special cells will do the same thing for headline-grabbing actions. Anig Gavar has a military arm, which is capable of fielding significant forces on a few worlds. More commonly, it provides arms and advisors, fueling local insurgencies which may or may not be openly associated with the movement. They might just have a planet where there's some unrest, and they might just say, okay, the heck with it. We're going to go ahead and we're going to support this particular rebellion, not that it's furthering our ends, but that it's just furthering the ends that we want in general. Overall, the Anig Gavar is anti-imperial rather than pro-Zodani, but its willingness to take assistance wherever it is offered has allowed elements of the movement to be co-opted into serving Zodani aims. It is likely the organization would oppose a Zodani regime as bitterly as it does the Imperium, a fact that's not lost on the consulate's intelligence services. This makes it probable that Anig Gavar operatives are being tracked by the Zodani and will be redeployed into Imperial space from worlds the consulate overruns, or else will just quietly disappear. I like that. They're going to use them where they can use them. If they can't use them, they're going to make them go away. You're not going to be allowed to be active on Zodani-occupied planets, or worse yet, in the consulate. We're going to go ahead and we can control it because we know who you are, because we've been funding you quietly for 20, 30 years. I just thought that was really cool. And that breathes a lot of life into the organization that up till now, in my experience, has just been a few lines about how they were a sleeper unit. I think this is way more interesting than a sleeper unit. I like the idea that it's an organic, homegrown group that's turned to terrorism and is now being used by the Zodani against the Imperium. Just very good, very well done. I like that how much all this was thought out throughout the course of this book. And this is the first group that I looked at and I thought, okay, cool. They've moved beyond the caricature it had been into something all by itself. So well done, Martin Doherty. Again, I like this book a great deal. There's a lot of things in here that I'm really enjoying, and I'll share a few of them from time to time. I recommend it highly. So let me know what you think. If you've had an opportunity to read through this, or maybe you've used the Anig Gavar in your campaign, and maybe you've got a different take on it. Maybe there's another way we can use them that I'm not thinking about. Please leave it in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. Take a look at the Patreon. Help me out there if you can. Again, that's the only way I'm able to grab stuff like this to share with you. And I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on page 121.